Hello, thank you for taking the time to listen to this Minnesota Department of Education Food and Nutrition Service PowerPoint presentation on the school breakfast program meal pattern regulations. If you have any questions about the presentation or its contents, please call our office at 651-582-8528 in the metro area or toll free at 1-800-366-8922. Why is breakfast important in school? It helps students learn. There's quite a bit of research out there now that proves it does. Students who participate in school breakfast show improved attendance, behavior, standardized achievement test scores, as well as decreased tardiness. Children who are undernourished have poorer cognitive functioning when they miss breakfast. Providing breakfast to students at school improves their concentration, alertness, comprehension, memory, and learning. School breakfast participation is associated with a lower body mass index, BMI, an indicator of excess body fat, lower probability of overweight, and lower probability of obesity. Today, I'm going to very broadly explain the breakfast meal pattern, monitoring, and record-keeping requirements. Because many of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act regulations have been implemented using a phased-in approach, we'll begin by focusing on the breakfast meal pattern requirements that are currently in place. Please keep an eye out via a listserv message for USDA modifications, changes, or updates to the breakfast requirements. Remember that requirements can change or be adjusted slightly anytime during the school year. Also remember, it's progress, not necessarily perfection. At a glance, here are the important changes to the school breakfast program. The new breakfast meal pattern took effect July 1st, 2013, but this year a few new requirements were phased in. The grade groups are the same as lunch and include K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. However, there is enough overlap on the requirements to allow a K through 12 grouping. The 4 target nutrients are similar to the lunch target nutrients and include calories, sodium, trans fat, and saturated fat. There are 3 food components that are required to be served for the school breakfast program. They include milk, grain, and fruit. If a school decides to implement offer versus serve, a minimum of 4 food items must be offered. The required fruit portion size is 1 cup, and no more than half of the weekly fruit offerings can be in the form of juice. Similar to lunch, an emphasis is placed on whole grain-rich foods. All grain items offered for breakfast must be whole grain rich. To offer menu planners flexibility and students additional choices, meat and meat alternates can be used to substitute for some of the weekly grain requirements. This can occur after the 1 ounce equivalent minimum daily grain requirement is offered. The breakfast program is now part of the state administrative review process. State monitors will be observing breakfast meal service at 1 or more of your schools. The grade groups for the school breakfast program do correspond to lunch. The 3 separate groups are K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. There are specific portion size requirements for each grade group that must be met. However, there is overlap between the portion sizes among each of the 3 groups. Parameters for planning one K through 12 grade group are pretty narrow, but it is possible if offering only 1 meal pattern is appropriate for your food service operation. So here's a quick snapshot of what the meal pattern looks like for the different grade groups. You can see that fruit is required for all 3 grade groupings. The minimum portion size is 1 cup. No more than half of the weekly fruit offerings can be in the form of juice. Vegetables can be served in place of fruit if the menu planner would like to do so, but before a starchy vegetable can be offered, the menu planner must plan at least 2 cups of vegetables from the non-starchy vegetable subgroups sometime throughout the week. There is a minimum serving size of 1 ounce equivalent of grains to be planned at each day, but you can see that there is a weekly requirement as well. For grades K through 5, we must offer students at least 1 ounce equivalents of grains each day, but over the course of a week, we must offer them a minimum of 7 ounces. So that means that on some days, you will be planning more than 1 grain item. For the grades 6 through 8, the daily requirement is 1 ounce equivalent, but the weekly requirement is 8 ounce equivalents. For grades 9 through 12, the daily requirement is again 1 ounce, but the weekly requirement is a 9-ounce equivalence. There are no meat alternate requirements for the school breakfast meal pattern, but the USDA has allowed menu planners to substitute an appropriate meat alternate food item for some of the weekly grain items. This is an option that menu planners may want to use. The fluid milk requirement is 1 cup per day across all 3 grade groupings. If your school chooses to implement offer versus serve, at least 4 food items from the 3 food components must be offered at each meal service. Here are the nutrient requirements for breakfast listed by grade group. You can see that for calories, the weekly range for grades K through 5 is 350 to 500. So that means that over the course of the week, the average of the daily calories must be between 350 and 500. For grades 6 through 8, the calorie range is 400 to 550. For grades 9 through 12, the calorie range is 450 to 600. Minimum and maximum calorie levels applies to average meals served over the course of the week. Individual meals within a week may be above or below the weekly range. If offering one meal pattern to all students, calorie and other nutrient requirements for each grade still apply. But you can see that a menu that has a calorie range of 450 to 500 calories would meet all grade group calorie requirements, but that only gives the menu planner a 50-calorie flexibility range. Let's take a few minutes to walk through the meal pattern components, starting with fruit. The minimum daily portion size is 1 cup of fruit. There is no maximum limits, so you may plan and serve larger portion sizes if you wish. However, keep in mind that although there is no fruit maximum, there is a calorie range. Forms of fruit that can be served include fresh, frozen, canned, and dried. This means that you can utilize some of the dried cherries or cranberries that are offered as part of the USDA commodity food items. Frozen fruits should be packed without added sugar. However, USDA has authorized a temporary allowance of frozen fruit with added sugar through the school year 14-15. Single fruit items or a combination of fruits and vegetables may be offered. No more than half of the weekly fruit offerings can be in the form of juice. Be sure that the juice you offered is 100% juice and pasteurized. Moving on from fruit to the grains component, we can see that the minimum daily portion size for all grade groups is 1 ounce equivalent. USDA has given SFAs flexibility in exceeding the weekly grain maximum. The weekly grain maximum has not been completely removed because if you plan your menus within the meal pattern requirements, the nutrient standard or calories should also meet requirements. There are minimum daily requirements and there are minimum weekly requirements for the grain group. The weekly minimum beginning in the school year 2014-15 are 7-ounce equivalents for grades K through 5, 8-ounce equivalents for grades 6 through 8, and 9-ounce equivalents for grades 9 through 12. Remember, all grain items offered as a part of a reimbursable breakfast must be whole grain rich. What does whole grain rich mean anyways? Whole grain, flour, or meal is the product derived by grinding the entire grain kernel. That would include the outer husk or the bran, the inner endosperm, and the vitamin-rich germ portion. The inner endosperm is usually what is used to make refined grain products or flours. Foods that are labeled whole grain rich contain 100% whole grain or contain a blend of whole grain meal and/or flour and enriched meal and/or flour, of which at least 50% is whole grain. Here are some examples of credible meat alternates that you may consider using in breakfast menus. You may want to offer half a cup of yogurt, which would credit for 1 ounce equivalent. 1 ounce of cheese would be substituted for 1 ounce equivalents as well, and a half an egg is also equal to 1 ounce equivalent. Remember that breakfast meats require a child nutrition label or product formulation statement to show how much actual meat is in the product. Tofu is now credible. Refer to the USDA memo referenced in the slide for more information. We'll finish up the meal pattern requirements with the milk component. Menu planners must offer students at least 2 choices of flavors or fat content of milk. This can include skim milk, 1%, or lactose-reduced or lactose-free skim or 1% milk. The skim milk can be flavored or unflavored. The 1% milk must be unflavored or white milk only. An example of milk choices might be unflavored white skim plus chocolate skim. Another option might be 1% unflavored white plus unflavored skim. Finally, there has been no change for milk substitutions, so if you have a student who requests a soy milk or juice substitute, there are specific guidelines that must be followed. If a school decides to operate offer versus serve, at least 4 food items must be offered, which is specific to offer versus serve only. Fruit items can be split to count as more than one food item. For example, 1 cup of pineapple and 1 cup of grapes will count as 2 separate food items under offer versus serve. But in order to credit as one food item, fruit and vegetable must be in portion sizes of at least 1 cup. Students must select at least 3 food items from what is offered. For example, if the menu planner plans 4 food items, students must select at least 3 under offer versus serve. One of the required 3 food items must be at least half a cup of fruit and/or vegetable. Remember, offered refers to food items the menu planner makes available on any given day, and selected refers to the food items a student selects from the menu that is offered. Meals cannot be placed before a student and claimed if the student does not intend to take a meal. The same monitoring and point of service requirements apply as before. School food authorities must determine an appropriate location where an assessment can be made by a staff member. All meals, regardless of meal service type, must be monitored at the point where students are served or select their meal to determine what students selected a meal and whether the meal selected by each student is reimbursable. Does the meal contain the correct type and number of food items and the correct portion sizes? If so, the meal can be reimbursed. There are 3 categories of breakfast meal service: traditional cafeteria, grab-and-go cafeteria, and alternate locations. In a traditional cafeteria, students select meals in the cafeteria line and proceed to the cashier. Meal counts should be taken at the end of the meal service line after students have had the opportunity to select a reimbursable meal. Students without a reimbursable meal must either be charged a la carte prices or encouraged to select the missing items needed. Front-of-line meal counts may be allowable in certain situations. Staff members must assess whether each student has a reimbursable meal after they have a chance to select from all food items. There are 2 different types of grab-and-go service styles. In a unitized service type, students are given all or a combination of food items in a bag or clamshell, and in a self-select service type, students select food items and place them in a bag. It's important that monitors ensure that each student takes all 4 food items without offer versus serve and at least 3 food items with offer versus serve. Monitoring must occur where the student selects the meal, not where they consume the meal, ensuring that the monitor is able to identify items in a bag or a clamshell as the student passes the point of service. If you have a grab-and-go service style for breakfast and also want to implement offer versus serve, you may want to pre-plate or bundle some of the food items. USDA allows schools to bundle 2 or 3 food items if facility space or design are challenges. If bundling, consider other ways to offer choices like fruit basket or a variety of milk or a variety of bundles. Remember that offer versus serve is never required at breakfast for any grades. SFAs are encouraged to remain consistent with the intent of offer versus serve to allow students choice and flexibility, reduce waste, and food costs. Record-keeping requirements have not changed and are similar to lunch. All meal pattern contribution documentation like food production records, recipes, child nutrition labels, USDA product fact sheets, nutrition fact labels, and ingredient statements list must be kept on file. Meal counts need to be documented and also kept for review. A food safety plan should be utilized and documented as well as any special diet statements. That concludes our training on the new breakfast meal pattern. If you have any questions, please feel free to give Food and Nutrition Services a call at 651-582-8526 if you're in the metro area, or toll free at 1-800-366-8922. You can also email us at mde.fns@state.mn.us. Thank you and enjoy your day.